You know the scene, right? You're digging through the medicine cabinet for a headache pill, you find a bottle, and then you see it, the expiration date. And it was a year ago. So, does that date really matter? Well, that's what we're going to figure out.
Okay, so this is a super common dilemma. On one hand, you don't want to just toss it. I mean, medicine isn't cheap. But on the other, is it safe? What's the right call here?
So, to really get to the bottom of this, we've got to figure out what that date on the bottle actually means. And spoiler alert, it's not quite what you think. It's definitely not like the expiration date on your milk. Okay, so that date, it's required by law. And it's basically the manufacturer's official promise. They've done a ton of testing, and they're guaranteeing that the medicine will be 100% potent and completely safe up until that exact day. The moment the clock ticks past midnight, well, that guarantee is officially off the table. Now, here's something you might not have noticed. The date the manufacturer prints is often different from the beyond use date your pharmacy slaps on the bottle. You know the one. That pharmacy date is almost always shorter, usually about a year. And there's a good reason for it. The second you crack that seal, the medicine is exposed to, well, your life, heat, humidity, light, and that can start to change things. So does that mean the drug turns into a pumpkin at midnight? Is that date a hard and fast rule? Well, this is where things get really interesting. And it's all thanks to a massive study done for a pretty important client, the U.S. military.
See, the Department of Defense had this enormous stockpile of medications. We're talking billions of dollars worth. And they were just throwing out mountains of it the second it expired. It was costing them a fortune. So they went to the FDA and said, hey, can you figure out how long this stuff is actually good for? This led to something called the Shelf Life Extension Program, or SLEP for short.
And the results? Whoa, they were absolutely mind-blowing. They tested more than 100 different drugs, thousands of batches, and found that a whopping 88% of them were still perfectly fine long after they supposedly expired.
And we're not talking about a few extra months here. The average extension was 5.5 years. Think about that. And this included common stuff like antibiotics, amoxicillin, Cipro, allergy medicine like diphenhydramine, and even critical medications like injectable morphine.
Okay, so if so many drugs last way longer, what does it even mean for a drug to go bad? Let's geek out on the science for a minute.
You know that thing when you open an old bottle of aspirin and it kind of smells like vinegar? Well, if you've ever smelled that, you've actually witnessed chemistry happening right in front of you. That smell is the perfect clue.
The process is called hydrolysis. It sounds complicated, but it's really not. It just means a chemical is breaking down because it's reacting with water. And that can be just the tiny bit of moisture in the air. In aspirin's case, it breaks down into two other things, and one of them is acetic acid. And guess what acetic acid is? Yep, it's the main component of vinegar. But here's the kicker. Our noses are ridiculously sensitive to that vinegar smell. You can actually smell it when only a tiny, tiny fraction of the aspirin is broken down. So a faint smell doesn't mean the whole bottle is useless. It just means the process has barely started.
And you know, scientists don't just sit around waiting for this to happen. They actually do it on purpose in the lab. It's called forced degradation. They'll blast drugs with acid, heat, intense light. Basically, they torture the medicine to see exactly how and when it breaks down and what it turns into.
Okay, so we've established that a lot of pills are pretty tough. But now we need to talk about the most important part of this whole thing. Because for some medications, taking them after they've expired isn't just a bad idea, it can be downright dangerous.
Honestly, stories of people getting sick from an expired drug becoming toxic are incredibly rare. The real danger, most of the time, isn't that the drug becomes poisonous. It's that it stops working. It loses its punch. And for some conditions, a medicine that doesn't work is just as dangerous. All right, this is the do not mess around list. Tetracycline is the one big exception, the one drug that's been linked to actual harm, specifically kidney damage when it degrades. But for others, like insulin, nitroglycerin for heart conditions, or those liquid antibiotics you keep in the fridge, the problem is that they lose their power fast. And with eye drops, the preservatives can fail, which opens the door for nasty bacteria to grow in there. You do not want that. Perfect example is an EpiPen. Think about it. They get tossed in bags, left in hot cars. One study looked at expired EpiPens and found some had as little as 13% of their original dose left. Now imagine needing that in a life-or-death allergic reaction. That's a risk you just can't take. Okay, so on one hand, we have a military study showing tons of drugs are fine for years. On the other hand,
We have a list of drugs where taking an expired dose is a huge risk. So where does that leave us? What's the final call on that old bottle of pills? Well, even with that military study, the official advice from the FDA is crystal clear. Don't risk it. And it makes sense, right? There are just too many variables for you to know for sure. How is it stored? Was it ever in a hot car? What's the specific chemistry? So their advice is simple. When in doubt, throw it out. Safely, of course. So at the end of the day, it's all about being smart and safe. First, prioritize. If a medicine is for something serious, your heart, a severe allergy, diabetes, don't even think about it. Get a new one. Second, just look at it. If it's crumbling, discolored, or smells weird, that's a hard no. Third, store your meds properly in a cool, dry spot, which, by the way, means the see-me bathroom cabinet is probably the worst place. And finally, get rid of old meds the right way. Your pharmacist can tell you how. And all of this leaves us with a pretty big question, doesn't it? On one side, you have a system of expiration dates that seems to create billions of dollars in pure waste. But on the other, for some critical drugs, that date is an absolutely essential line in the sand for safety. It really makes you wonder, is there a better way to do this? A way to balance that crucial safety with a little more common sense?